I'm Teresa Carraggio, and this is Third Paradigm. Today, I'd like to conclude the series that I've been doing on Yuval Noah Harari and his relationship with Russell Brand. Some of the viewers who have said, no, it's not just that Russell is affectionate to everyone, but he also supports Yuval ideologically. And I think the assumption is that Yuval also supports the Great Reset ideologically and is the voice for it. What I want to make in this video is the point that you can't just reject a person by saying, oh, he's the enemy, I hate everything that he stands for, and be able to counter that narrative. That if you're really going to try to challenge the ideology and the ideas behind the Great Reset and the people who agree with that, you need to do it by listening to what someone is actually saying and then using your own facts and logic and their ideas in order to counter that. What I'm going to be responding to is a talk that a viewer sent as proof that it wasn't just that Russell Brand did a random kiss on the forehead to Yuval Noah Harari, but he actually supports him. And so this is a 2018 presentation that Yuval gave for Penguin Books to a class of students. And Russell in that introduces him. It was called On the Future of Work. Yuval says, what worries me, and this is why I say these things and use very provocative terms like useless people and useless class, is to draw people's attention to this potential danger, because this should be one of the top items on the political agenda today. We need to ask politicians, what will you do about the coming automation revolution? What will you do to prevent the emergence of a useless class? In response to a question about what students can do, Yuval talks about becoming part of an organization or starting one, because 50 people who cooperate are more powerful than 500 activists, each operating on their own. Russell adds that students should democratize where they are. He says, as evidenced by the society we live in now, a few people cooperating can dominate and control huge numbers of people. All of us are in that huge number being controlled. One student asked about self-directed learning, and Yuval says that the most important thing is focus. Censorship, he says, actually works now by flooding people with enormous amounts of information. Whether true or not, it doesn't matter. Just flood people with information to the degree that they can't make sense of reality anymore. The goal of schools isn't to provide information anymore. It's to provide a map of reality or the tools for someone to construct their own map of reality. When Russell asked Yuval how he did it, he answers, my method was to focus on the most important questions and then to go wherever they led me. I have a question and I'm on a quest, wherever that leads me. In his talk, Yuval mentions the importance of philosophers because software engineers are, by default, making some of the most important ethical decisions of our time. He uses the example of self-driving cars that may need to choose between killing a child or diverting into a lorry full of people. Where these were hypothetical before, now it will do whatever the algorithm says. Russell uses the example of General Motors deciding it was cheaper to settle lawsuits than it was to recall faulty cars. So we know how the market will decide, by whatever's the most profitable. Yuval says it's so dangerous because so much power is centralized in so few hands. They may have a background in engineering, but they usually have no background in ethics and law and sociology and so forth. On the useless class, Yuval says It's not a prophecy. If we make the right kinds of decisions today, we can prevent that dystopia from occurring. Many jobs are not worth saving. What we need to protect is not the jobs, but the humans. If we can take care of human needs, and humans will have more leisure time and more opportunity to explore themselves, to develop themselves, to engage in art, community activities, meditation, or sports instead of working so much, this is wonderful. Russell summarizes what Yuval is saying as all of us needing to educate ourselves on ethics. And rather than looking at society and saying, how can we make ourselves fit in with it? We have to look at ourselves and say, how can we make society fit in with us? Another episode I did on Yuval Harari was on a conversation about polarization with Esther Perel, and she is a relationship counselor. What Esther said I thought was very interesting and very useful for all of us during these times. The premise that I put forward in that one was that we should neither wholeheartedly believe nor reject what someone says based on who they are or their associations. Instead, we need to look at the person's consistency within their own framework and how the statement fits with the logic that makes the most sense of the known facts. Esther began with a very interesting point. In couples with long-standing arguments, the other person knows what the partner will say and is already prepared to oppose it. What can divert this opposition is surprising them with agreement by acknowledging whatever is driving them to hold the position they have. You can undermine the pre-rehearsed rant by not playing your part, starting on common ground and seeing what happens. So if you start with what gives the intensity behind the other person's argument, you can free them to listen to something else, because you've already said the thing they were going to say. Then you follow with, and if we were only to listen to my position, here's what else we'd be missing. And then you've covered the next thing they were going to say. As Esther says, we co-create each other in polarized relationships. We intensify each other. So if we want the other person to see our view, we need to show we've listened to them. In that same talk, Yuval surprised me with some things that he said, like he acknowledged that Russia was winning against Ukraine. And he seemed to indicate that Israel was not in the right when it came to Palestinians. So I think that that's worth listening to. One where he really surprised me, I talk about in my episode, Yuval Harari and the meta-wealth mini-verse. In this, Yuval paints such an alarming and repugnant image of the Great Reset that he seems to be warning us against it. At the same time, he points clearly to the solutions. We need to take control of our own lives, upgrading the health of our bodies rather than intervening after they break down, producing our own food in active, energetic ways rather than being passive consumers, having family and intimate community to whom we're responsible rather than government and the market, using our labor to serve our own purpose rather than serving the rich, to whom we're useless, superfluous, worthless, and meaningless, in his words. As the spokesperson selling us the Great Reset and transhumanism, I have to wonder if Yuval is a truth double agent. He states that people were healthier and had easier lives when they were hunter-gatherers, kind of odd for a vegetarian. He speculates that people were likely happier in the 1700s when they were surrounded by large families in groups of around 200, to whom they mattered, rather than being isolated and alienated. Again, his words. But he says it happened, and humans are malleable and survived. In conclusion, not only do I not think that Russell Brand is consorting with the enemy, I'm not sure that Yuval is the enemy. It seems to me that he's not really defending the Great Reset. He's warning us against it. And the solutions that he's proposing sound a lot like the same ones that James Corbett does in his Solutions Watch. So I think there is a larger lesson to be drawn from this, to not be looking for enemies and saying if we can just put as many people as possible on the opposite side, that's going to win this. I think we need to be looking for converts and finding common ground, starting out with here's where I agree and here's where I don't. And here's where it seems like maybe you don't even agree with what you're saying because here's how it matches this. I had 7 viewers from Substack that dropped me after my last episode because I had mentioned climate change in there. And one of them sent me a note and said, because you use this term, I am no longer going to be listening to you, and cheers. And then another one addressed me as lady in the comment thread and then gave a long lecture on why climate change was a hoax and ended by blaming me for the deindustrialization of developed societies and telling me that I needed to wake up. Now, that video, as I explained to some much more polite objectors to that term, was made 2 years ago. And the book that I wrote was mostly a decade ago. And there definitely have been times when I have believed that climate change is a real thing. I'm not sure right now. I feel like we are being lied to from both sides. And the dichotomy that I see being presented is either we have environmental standards and social justice kind of standards, or we just let the market dictate and we make as much profits as possible and encourage all of those corporations to do that because that's the kind of return that we want on our investment for our pension funds. That is a false dichotomy, and we need to get away from it. So I think that creating these kinds of affronts, you need to agree with me and you need to use the exact same language that I do, is something that is setting ourselves up for failure, because I don't know what it is that I'm wrong about right now, but I know there's something. There's a lot of somethings that 2 years from now, I'm going to look back and say, oh, interesting. I can't believe I actually thought that, but I have changed my mind. And I'm sure that there are those things for you too. So if we don't want to be hoisted up by our own contradictions, I think we need to be more patient with other people's. And to follow up, when I am allowed back on YouTube, I will put when did you stop being wrong, and also a Yuval playlist, which all of these will be up on Substack. And if you are not subscribed there, I suggest it because that's where everything that I do is complete with links and videos and a Rumble along with the YouTube. So it's the best conversations that are happening on those threads. Thank you for watching.